Did you know that two psychologists designed the CIA torture program? Welcome back to the channel, folks. Dr. Sharma here, physician, board-certified psychiatrist, and Air Force veteran. In the aftermath of 9/11, Drs. James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen were contract psychologists who designed an enhanced interrogation program for the US government. Neither of them had any experience as interrogators, any real knowledge of Al-Qaeda, or any scientific evidence to justify their methods. The methods used in the interrogation program included chaining men to the ceiling, keeping prisoners naked, having jarring music blaring for days on end, placing them into insect-filled coffins, and even waterboarding, which is essentially nearly drowning an individual multiple times by placing a rag over their mouth and pouring water over it. Yes, it is as barbaric as it sounds. The psychologists wanted to use their techniques to induce a state of learned helplessness in detainees that would make them more compliant. Unfortunately, these methods produced little to no actionable intelligence, and there were documented deaths. Even though the psychologists claimed that there were foiled plots, this was completely false, as a subsequent investigation by the Senate Intelligence Committee found out. But the psychologists set up a private company which was paid $81 million before the contract was terminated in 2009. The American Psychological Association disowned these psychologists, saying that they violated the ethics of their profession and left a stain on the discipline of psychology. Although there were hearings held about these psychologists' actions, the CIA also agreed to pay up to $5 million towards these psychologists' attorney fees. There was a settlement from the case, but the terms are confidential. Now keep in mind, these prisoners were kept at CIA black sites around the world. They were held without charges and without legal defense or trials. There were many people who were held for years at these sites, tortured and subsequently released without any charges. So I say this to emphasize that many innocent people were also tortured in this process. There was one particularly harrowing account from a cab driver in Pakistan, Ahmed Rabbani, who was abducted by the Pakistani government and sold to the United States as a terrorist by a different name, which was false. He described being put down a hole suspended by his wrists from two chains that were locked to a metal bar, and his feet could barely touch the ground. He was left like that for days without food or water, and he could gradually feel his shoulders dislocating. It turns out that Jessen and Mitchell, the psychologists, picked up this technique from the Spanish Inquisition. It was called strapado. The Inquisition used to do this technique to make people suffer, usually fellow Christians who were called heretics, or they were tortured into admitting they were heretic. By the way, Rabbani, the cab driver from Pakistan, he spent more than 20 years at Guantanamo before being freed without any charges. Besides the ethical issue itself, one of the many reasons this type of interrogation does not work is because when you put someone in that situation, they will do anything and say anything to escape. This includes falsely confessing to crimes and sending people on wild goose chases with false intelligence. Imagine the number of our special operators and other troops who were put in harm's way because of this false intelligence. For instance, let's say one of the prisoners says there's a high-value target in a compound in Syria. A team goes there to investigate, and the intelligence was faulty. Best case scenario, they come up empty-handed. Worst case scenario, someone gets injured or dies. In my opinion, this was absolutely one of the worst ethical violations in mental health, at least in modern or recent history. As a physician, any participation in this would violate the oath I took to do no harm. Although these psychologists weren't physicians, as psychologists, they hold a certain amount of trust, and they obviously aren't supposed to use their knowledge in this way. This is even more significant considering that these two were former Air Force officers. This means they were extremely well versed in the Geneva Conventions and how this type of torture is considered a war crime. The Geneva Conventions specifically state that torture, inhuman treatment, biological experiments, willfully causing great suffering, serious injury to body or health, willfully depriving a prisoner of a fair trial, all of those actions are considered war crimes. These psychologists and the leaders of this program participated in this and knew exactly what they were doing. This brings me to the topic of ethics in medicine and mental health. We have to think about this continuously for multiple reasons. It's a slippery slope when it comes to torture and experimentation. These two psychologists that I described did these acts in the name of national security. It reminded me of the 20 Nazi doctors who were tried at Nuremberg for war crimes. And yes, these were medical doctors who did human experimentation on concentration camp inmates, mass murder under the guise of euthanasia. One of the most infamous was Joseph Mengele, who evaded capture and escaped. The experiments done in the name of science were many. It included high-altitude experiments on prisoners at Dachau, placing inmates in low-pressure chambers to simulate altitudes as high as 68,000 feet. They subjected prisoners to freezing temperatures by submerging them into vats of icy water. They tested new medications by inflicting battlefield-like wounds on prisoners and then giving them antibiotics. They tested different poisons, injecting people with cyanide and phenol. They injected the live bacteria for tuberculosis, hoping to come up with a vaccine. They tested the effects of phosgene, a toxic gas used as a weapon. They practiced and tried bone, muscle, and joint transplants on healthy prisoners. They practiced sterilization procedures, artificial insemination, forced others to drink seawater, the list goes on. These doctors also committed these acts of torture, murder, interrogation, experimentation in the name of national security and protecting the so-called Third Reich. The Nuremberg trials found that the victims of these so-called physicians were treated worse than cattle. Obviously, they were all charged with war crimes and crimes against humanity. I say all this to describe that we have to be very careful, especially as physicians and mental health practitioners. A lot of trust is placed into us when it comes to patients, knowing the human mind, knowing the human body. We should not be using our knowledge of the human mind to inflict pain, suffering, and harm onto others. This not only violates the oath we take, but it's unethical, immoral, and inhumane. I still can't believe that the two psychologists we discussed earlier literally pioneered the CIA torture program. That's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you found this interesting. If you enjoyed it and the topic, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. It really helps and it tells me that I'm doing something right. Also, please drop a comment below to let me know what you think about this topic, and if you have a request on a different topic you want me to cover in the future, I'd be happy to do a video on it. As always, thanks for watching. Dr. Sharma signing off. See you next time.